This survey has been flying around for a little while now. I've seen some video clips on it and some social media posts about it. And the title of the survey is Identifying and Understanding Child Sexual Offending Behaviours and Attitudes Amongst Australian Men. So the survey is quite long. There is 50 odd pages to it, and what I've actually done is found a website that has given us a brief summary of this document, because it would just be so lengthy for me to go through the document page by page. And the title of the website is A Survey Found 1 in 6 Men Admit to Sexual Feelings for Children. So is paedophilia increasing? Now, the first paragraph of this website report is 1 in 6, 15% of Australian men aged over 18 recently surveyed said that they had sexual feelings for a child or teen younger than 18 years old. Now, I don't know what the age of consent is in Australia. Let me just search that so we can find out. Okay, so the age of consent in Australia, Google is telling me that it's 16 or 17 years old, depending on different states and territories within the country. So here, of course, in England, where I live, we're 16. In America, it's 18. I'm so interested to understand who came up with these ages and why are we all different. In the future, I'd like to make documentaries about that, or when I have a team of people, I'd like to research that and make videos about that. So we get that piece of information. In Australia, it's between 16 and 17, but this survey is considering children or teenagers under the age of 18 as children in this group. And as they say, 1 in 6 men have admitted that they have sexual feelings for somebody under the age of 18. I wonder how this survey was actually conducted. They must have had to have signed papers, and the people who actually put the survey together must have had to have kind of promised their anonymity. I don't know what that word is, to ensure that they remain anonymous. I, in some respect, want to say, and I wonder what you think about this, I kind of want to say to these men that participated in the survey, thank you. Thank you for doing this and being honest about it. Because without these types of research, I don't think we can really start to understand the risk that young people are under, because, you know, we still live in a time where we think that this crime only happens in certain communities or in certain spaces, and somebody who would offend against a child is somebody who is an old man, lonely, sitting behind his computer screen with no friends. You know, it's men who have urges that are, at first point, illegal. So the website continues. This data was part of a study by UNSW, Sydney and Jesuit Social Services. Researchers asked 1,945 men about their attraction to children via an online recruitment process. So the researchers also found around 1 in 10 Australian men has sexually offended against a child. I wonder what the ethics of this research was, because did they then ask, have you ever been prosecuted? Because if they haven't been prosecuted, then they just admitted to a crime. Next point. Around half of this group report sexual feelings towards children, while the others may be offending or situational or opportunistic reasons. Now, this situational or opportunistic reasons, I've had a bit of insight into that through the few people that comment on my social media posts and my YouTube channel, who are coming at this from a completely different angle. They come from different schools of thought, and I remember one of them specifically on my Facebook mentioned quite a few times that not all people who sexually abuse a child are paedophiles. And the reason why they say that, from what I learned from their comments, was because sometimes that person will be in a situation that they feel aroused by, but they've never really seeked that situation before. So we would say that a paedophile is somebody whose primary sexual desire and arousal comes from a child. And this website actually goes into that definition a little bit further. So as this podcast continues, we will get into that. But their primary desire and arousal comes from a child. But what some people are saying is that actually sometimes a person, mostly a man, would find themselves in a situation where they get aroused by something they didn't really realize they were, or it's all situational. Does that kind of make sense? And that is why some people have their reservations about the paedophile hunters. And oh my God, I've used that word, paedophile, so many times now. YouTube is never going to do anything with this video. Ugh. They have their reservations for the people who go out there and pose as children online and wait for somebody to bite the bait and engage in a conversation with that person, arrange a meetup, and then sting them at the meetup. And the reason why is, what did somebody use the word? Is it entrapment? Entrapment, meaning if the hunter had never created that profile, then that person who actually took the bait would have never taken any bait and would have never gone down that rabbit hole. Now, you may be thinking as I'm talking about this, you've got way too much understanding and empathy for those people, Jeremy. They're evil, they're disgusting, they're monsters. Now, I understand that. I was offended against by one of them, so you need to trust me, I understand that. But with a survey like this and the research that it's showing, with the sample size of 1,945 men, that's a decent sample size, that 1 in 10 of them have offended against a child. 1 in 6 of them have said they have sexual feelings for a child. We are not just talking about your monster or your evil person that we'd be able to spot a mile off. We are talking about your average men. We're talking about fathers. We're talking about good workers. We're talking about senior people in companies. We're talking about your street cleaner. We're talking about your shop owner. It has to be like that if we're going to start talking about 1 in 6. Now, of course, this 1,945 men in Australia, we cannot say that that's going to be across the millions of men in each country, but it's going to give us a really good idea of what we're talking about here. And yeah, I just thought about talking about something, but I'm going to keep that for a little bit later. Let's continue with the website. Right. The third bullet point that this website says that you can see on the screen here. By the way, if you're watching along on YouTube, you can see this website that I'm pulling up what I'm reading from, and I'll put the link in the description if you want to go and see it in your own time. I'll also put a link in the description to the full document. And if you're listening along on your podcast app in audio format only, don't worry, you can still follow along. And also, I'll put the links in the description. So the third bullet point on this website, the researchers also found, of the men with sexual feelings towards children, 29.6 of them wanted help. Now, let's talk about this. Around a year or two ago, I released some podcasts around this discussion about, can we reach people who offend sexually against a child before they carry out the offence for the first time? That kind of has to be our goal, right? That kind of has to be our goal. That means putting time and effort into systems and support structures for people to come forward. Now, not all of them would come forward. In fact, probably only a minute few would, but at least some would. and we could work with them in some way to ensure that they never commit the crime for the first place. Now, the reason why, in my experience, from what I've seen from the backlash and some of the hate that I got when I released those particular podcasts, was because it's such an emotive thing to think about working with. And I use working with, not supporting with or helping, because that doesn't help the emotive charge, those words. So I use working with. These people create such a knee-jerk reaction because we only want to put them in the monsters box and the evil box. But if our primary concern is the welfare and the safety of children, then we have to reach these people in some way. Now, I just want to be really, really clear. This is not me thinking that you do 5 sessions with one of these men and all of a sudden those sexual feelings towards children have disappeared. Not a chance. I don't think if it's in the core of you, like a sexual desire or even something that arouses you sexually, I don't know if you can ever erase it, but you can manage it. And we want these people to manage what's going on in their head so that they never commit the crime for the first place. Or for this, around 1 in 10 Australian men has sexually offended against a child, we want to reach them too so that they don't offend again. I think the purpose of this podcast and the reason why I wanted to go through this website, which is referring to the document, because, before I started it, I was like, I only get to do one of these every 2 weeks approximately, at best every 2 weeks, because I just don't have the resources to do what I would like to do with this podcast, which is release 2 a week on different areas of the topic. So just a little insert here. If you're listening to this or watching this and you can give me 2 hours of your time every week to come and help me with this under a voluntary basis and help me build this podcast, please just DM me through my website, jeremyindica.com. The reason why I wanted to do this, even though I was umming and ahhing about it, is because you may have seen the podcast I released, which was about the 40-year-old man who arranged to meet a 14-year-old girl. And when you watch that video, when you watch along with the video that I reviewed, you see that he's just an average looking guy. In fact, he was a good looking guy. He had a wife, he had 2 daughters, he was a successful businessman, and that just really shocks people. And the fact that shocks people really shows me that we're still in the Stone Ages with this conversation. So let's continue with this website. Compared to men with no sexual feelings for or offending against children, the 4.9% of men with sexual feelings and previously offending against children were more likely to work with children. That's pretty obvious. Or is it? Yeah, they're not. I don't know. I don't know how to discuss that. Like, is it obvious that they would want to work with children if they have sexual feelings towards children? I don't think it's completely obvious, because I would hope, and here's me probably being naively optimistic, I would hope that the ones that would want the help, we saw that, didn't we, on the website, 29% of the men who have sexual feelings would like help. I would like them to make the decision not to work with children so that they're not in any kind of temptation. But again, maybe that's me being naively optimistic. So the next point is they're more likely to be married. Now, that's a massive surprise. I would have thought that wouldn't be the case. And I wonder why that is the case. They're more likely to be married. I wonder how they've even come to that conclusion. But here we go. The third point is have higher levels of social support. Okay, earn higher incomes, be a victim of child sexual abuse themselves. Okay, so the be married, have higher levels of social support, earn higher incomes. I don't understand personally the correlation there. That's through a lack of my understanding. That type of thing would be great to bring on an expert onto my podcast so we could discuss that. But to be a victim of sexual abuse themselves, yes, I know that there is this correlation between those who have sexual thoughts towards children, or who have offended against a child, to have been sexually abused themselves in their childhood. But I am always very careful around that discussion, because I don't want members of the public to think that if you've been sexually abused as a child and you're a male, then you're more likely to offend against another child. That puts us men who have been sexually abused in our childhood in a really horrible position, because I would hate anybody to look at me and think that. Now, here's another angle to that. For all the parents out there who have sons who have been sexually abused in their childhood, I'm so sorry that you go through that as parents. I have seen the pain that causes. It would be horrific for you to look at your son and start worrying that they could turn into a sexual predator off the back of what they went through. But interestingly, I suppose, because there is a correlation between those two things, it is something that we should be aware of. But I have heard more than a few times when high profile cases reach the media, people are like, oh, he was probably sexually abused as a child. And that's kind of like their go-to conclusion. And I don't like that, because yes, we're going to have some cases, but not all cases. And it almost excuses the action of the offender. And I don't like that. Okay, the next bit of the website. This contradicts the notion, so they're talking about these 5 bullet points: work with children, be married, have higher levels of social support, earn higher incomes, be a victim of childhood sexual abuse. This contradicts the notion that people who are sexually attracted to children and are willing to act on it are social outcasts and statistical outliers. Perfect paragraph. This is something we need to learn. This is something we need to understand. And this is something we need to be exposed to so we can get rid of this stereotype. Excellent. I'm going to read that paragraph again. This contradicts the notion that people who are sexually attracted to children are willing to act on it and are social outcasts and statistical outliers. So some people want help, and these people are not loners. These people are contributing members of society. They just have this double life, or this thing in their head, or this dark side, however you want to label it. Overall, the study was well designed and conducted. However, the authors acknowledged some limitations, of course. The majority, 64.8% of participants, self-identified as white. All right, that's a limitation. That 64.4% of the study was white. I wonder what the demographic in the country, does that represent the country well? I don't know. I hate it when race comes into the conversation, but I know it's a necessary part of the conversation too. 64.4% were born in Australia, and 92.8% identified as heterosexual. Therefore, members of specific minority populations may not have had an equal chance or inclination to participate, which could impact how representative the findings are. Yeah, of course. You've got a sample size of 1,945 men. I mean, you can't cover all bases. You'd need a sample size of 10,000, 20,000 men to do that. Now, an idea just came into my head. If you're thinking that as a community of people, as a society who are all concerned with the safety of children, this is valuable research for us to really broaden our horizons when it comes to the conversation of offenders. Wow, I mean, it wouldn't be too difficult with the help of AI these days to put on an open form online and market it and promote it and ask men to come forward anonymously. The only problem is my worry would be that you'd get trolls on there or people flooding the online form to try to skew the results. So yeah, okay, so maybe that wouldn't be so easy, but a good idea that's now in my mind. So okay, so there's a couple more paragraphs which I think are useful for us to go through because they're good questions. So the first one is, what is pedophilia? Now, here's the website's answer. Paedophilic disorder is a diagnosis assigned to adults, those aged over 16, and 5 years older than the children to whom they are sexually attracted to, who have a recurrent and intense sexual attraction specifically to prepubescent children, generally those who are 13 years and under. So I know of this too. A paedophile is somebody who has a primary interest and sexual attraction towards prepubescent children. So that means children before they enter the stage of puberty. So when we call somebody who offended against a 15-year-old a paedophile, it's actually technically incorrect. They're called a hebophile, I believe. And I would normally go and search that so we could find the definition, but I've got 2 bars left on the battery on my camera because it's an old camera that seems to be degrading with time, and I just don't have the money to replace it, which is very, very sad. So we will continue moving forward. But anyone that's watching, if you'd like to put the definition of paedophile, hebophile, and I think there's another one in the comment section so we can learn, that would be really helpful. The majority of paedophiles are male. Doesn't surprise me. We know that. Previous estimates suggest between 3 and 5% of the adult male population have a paedophilic disorder. Estimates suggest it's lower in women. Okay, so I have heard that the statistic is 98% of all sexual offences against children are conducted by a male. So we are looking at a crime that is heavily male orientated. That doesn't mean that I disregard anybody that was offended against a female, and I don't rate being offended against from a male or a female in any kind of order of severity. I consider the crime of sexual abuse against a child to be severe just across the board. But we are talking about a male-dominated crime, and that is why I often refer to men in this conversation, because it is men committing the crime. It's very interesting to start thinking about what is it in men that is drawing them to this. What is it in men that is arousing them towards, when you talk about prepubescent children, they're still so childlike. None of their features on their body or their face have been developed into anywhere near an adult. They're all still so innocent in their nature, so vulnerable in their nature, and sometimes I think it's a power game. It's a dominance game. It's the exploiting something so innocent game, and we can kind of relate to those. Energies, or energy is probably the wrong word. We can kind of relate to those circumstances in adult to adult consensual sexual encounters, relationships, or sexual play, we could call it, where there's power dynamics can be extremely arousing. Certain role plays where there's a dominant partner and a submissive partner can be extremely arousing. But why these men are drawn to carry out that dynamic with a child, it's got to be something psychological, but there has to be something visual as well. They have to find the visual element of the child exciting too. Again, more experts to come onto my podcast to deliver this, and in the future maybe I could get a studio so we could do these discussions face to face, and high quality camera equipment, high quality sound equipment. We could get this conversation in front of millions of people. It's so needed. Okay, next question. There's three more in fact. I'll label them so that you know whether you're interested in sticking around to the end of this podcast. The last 3 questions that the website goes through is paedophilia increasing? Can you cure paedophilia? And what can we do to better protect children? So, is paedophilia increasing? This is unlikely, the website says. Instead of the new data indicating more men are becoming sexually attracted to prepubescent children, it's more likely to indicate problems with previous sampling strategies. Okay, For example, many previous studies gathered data from either survivors of child sexual abuse, which we just saw would be skewed, or those who have been found guilty. Okay. Because studies were so targeted, they may have failed to capture the broader sample, which was more reflective of overall attitudes and behaviours. Yeah, I mean, that just completely makes sense. While there doesn't seem to be an increase in people who are sexually attracted to children, the internet has made it much easier for paedophiles to act on their desires and access child sexual abuse material or groom children from a distance anonymously. We understand that. A study in the United States found that of children aged 10 to 15 surveyed, 35% reported being the victim of either internet harassment or unwanted sexual solicitation. Not surprising on any of that. So let's go back to the question, is paedophilia increasing? This website says it's unlikely. Here's my personal opinion. I believe that it will be increasing. Shall I tell you why? It's because the opportunity and the situations that are now available to all people using the internet to access children, to watch content that is pushing the boundaries towards younger and younger models. We're talking pornography here. To be pulled down rabbit holes on your Instagram, which is full of sexual content, by the way, is so much more. You are so much more at high risk of those things. You've got so much more opportunity to indulge if that's what you want to indulge in. There's so much which drives a lesser chance that you would be able to resist the temptation that you know you've got in your head. Pre-internet, to offend against a child, you have to actually get direct access to them. And mostly, if we're talking about prepubescent children, you'd have to break the family mold first. You'd have to groom the family, the parents in particular, before you got to the child. So there's so many barriers before you actually get to committing the offence. But now on the internet, it's crazy. I mean, again, I'm going to keep citing previous podcasts that I've released, but you know, I've gone into like the teen porn category on legal porn sites. So that's models who are 18 and 19 years old, but some of them are dressing up as a lot younger than that. I know what they're doing. They're appealing to that market, and you start watching that, and maybe you get aroused by that, and then you want the one that looks a bit younger and then a bit younger, and you're drawn down this rabbit hole, and pre-internet you wouldn't have been. So with all of this, as I mentioned, opportunity and situations for temptations to be broken or temptations to be given into, I would say paedophilia is increasing. Really interesting point. I wonder what you think. So we've got 2 questions left. Can you cure paedophilia? What can we do to protect children? Let's go through this. So the website for the can you cure paedophilia question says, paedophilia cannot be cured, but it can be treated with hormone medication therapies, cognitive behavior therapy, CBD, and psychosocial methods such as group therapy. Drug treatment. Oh, no, hang on. Let's stop there. The first paragraph. Let me just read that again. Paedophilia cannot be cured, but it can be treated with hormone medication therapies, cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, and psychosocial methods such as group therapy. Now, people are going to be up in arms about this. Again, I've already mentioned on this podcast, this is not so much about can you be cured or can you not. I've given my personal opinion on it not being curable, but it can be treated. I don't know the ins and outs of that, but something needs to happen so these people manage it. That's the goal. So if hormone medication therapies, if different types of therapies are going to work for different people, we've got to have them available. I heard that there are only 3 centres in the whole of the world that are open and inviting to people who recognise they've got this in their head and they want to do something about it so that they never act on it and commit the crime in the first place. 3 centres in the world. We should have these centres dotted all over the country, but could you imagine if there was a building where the facility was, as we just mentioned, it invited people to come forward who had this arousal or desire in their head. I mean, it would just get it would get set alight instantly. I mean, there'd be people camping outside trying to cause violence to the people that walk through the door. Would stand no chance. But you can see the logic, right? If we are centered around the safety of children, you can see the logic in this. Next paragraph of the website. Drug treatments for paedophilic disorder that include testosterone lowering drugs have shown positive results in reducing sexual interests and behaviours. Okay. However, more data needs to be collected on larger sample populations before conclusions can be drawn. Okay, I understand that. So, drug treatments that reduce the testosterone of a man, or a lot of people call for castration of these people to remove their genitalia entirely. I don't know if that is a big move forward, and I don't know what you think about this, but let's say you were to remove genitalia as an example. I'm going to say that lots of sexual abuse of children, whether that be prepubescent or postpubescent, doesn't always involve genitalia in a physical sense. Of course, we've been through the online space and how the crime can be committed there, so that doesn't involve your genitalia directly. All right, yeah, there's more to say about that, but I don't want to come off on too much of a tangent. In-person sexual abuse, maybe it doesn't always involve the genitalia specifically, so the removal of the genitalia is not going to is that really going to bring us a massive step forward? Well, one answer to that would be, if it brings us any step forward, we need to take it. The testosterone lowering drugs, reducing sexual interests and behaviours in general, yeah, I can see how that would work. That would surely have to be some kind of treatment program. Would that be that person is on it for life, or would it need to be some kind of periodic treatment? Would it need to come supported with professional support, meaning a therapeutic process alongside it? I'm pretty sure you just can't start lowering people's testosterone and have your fingers crossed that solves the problem. But also, I'm not against any of these as solutions, and I don't think there is going to be a one size fits all. I think there needs to be 100 different approaches that we have, depending on the personality of the offender or or potential offender. Okay, the final paragraph. A 2021 study also found that CBT can be effective at reducing paedophiles' hypersexuality, compulsive sexual behaviour. CBT aims to change the thoughts and behaviours relating to paedophilia, with success measured by a reduction in the desire to offend against children. I mean, how you measure that, I don't know, because let's say you've got somebody, you'd have to have somebody so honest, wouldn't you? Let's say you had somebody who was potentially felt the danger of potentially offending, and through a government plan received this therapy technique. Or let's just take another cohort of person, somebody who's been released from prison, and part of their probation agreement is that they go through this therapy. Once they've finished, let's take the offender cohort who have been released from prison. They're obviously going to say, yeah, it worked. I don't think about children anymore. How do you prove that? But again, these intense therapeutic processes that can, for lack of a better way of explaining it, can potentially rewire the way you think about things. We'll try everything. Like, as a society, please try them all and get as many people that are open to trying them as possible, please, so that we at least gain a 10% chance that they won't offend. Like, we'll go for that. But we need to get around this knee-jerk emotional reaction of they're evil, push them into the corner, put them on an island by themselves and turn the light out on them and think that that's solving the problem, because of course it's not. Okay, we get to the final paragraph. I feel like this has been really interesting, by the way. I hope you feel the same. What can we do to protect children? We cannot stop predatory men attempting to access children, either in person or more frequently online. But we can, as parents and guardians and the broader community, put safeguards in place to ensure that they are not victimised. Oh, okay. I thought that was going to read that the children are not victimised. But actually, this is a... Okay, I see where this website's going. Let's read it again. But we can, as parents and guardians and the broader community, put safeguards in place to ensure they are not victimised. So what I'm reading from that, and this is something that, like, it takes a little while for you to even have a think about what this is proposing. You've got to write it differently than that. I think personally you've got to write it differently than that. Because what I feel like this is saying is we are victimising the men who have not offended yet, or who have come out of prison and will never offend again. We're putting the victim, we're victimising them, which is pushing them into a corner, which is not integrating them back into society, which is making them feel lonely, making them feel less engaged in life, making them feel like outsiders. And these are all contribute to them acting out in immoral, illegal behaviour in a violent way, or as a response to society not affecting them. I think that's what this is getting at. I wonder what you think about that. So as the UNSW, which is one of the organisations that funded this research, and also the Jesuit Social Services Study, notes, this includes... Okay, sorry, I've read that completely wrong. As the UNSW Jesuit Social Services Study, that's the study we're talking about, notes, these include improving safety of online dating sites to reduce the likelihood of predators targeting single parents to access children. So we should put safeguards in place for that. Well, we should put safeguards in place so predators don't target single parents to access children, or we should be focusing on the predator to not do that. I don't like the word predator, by the way. The interview that I did with Anna Sonoda on her book Duck Duck Groom, which you must check that out. It's about grooming and her explanation of it. She always uses the word of predator, and I'm not sure that's... I think that then puts these people in that circle of it only happens there, or they're a certain type of person. I think that breaks that down. I think if you say offender, it gives us the awareness that this could be anyone. That's my personal opinion. But yeah, I think the responsibility is on the offender not to target single parents, not improve safety of online dating sites. I'm not sure about that. Okay, next one. Increasing safeguards in environments where children are particularly vulnerable, such as daycare centres and sporting clubs. I mean, yeah, okay, I feel like that should be done and is being done to a lot better standard than it used to be. I've got some friends who are football coaches, and you have to go through like quite stringent safeguarding training to even just... participate in coaching the young people. So I feel like I personally would feel quite confident with that. I just want to read like where they're trying to go with this. Okay, third paragraph. Increasing support for men who are sexually attracted to children but who want help, via organisations like Stop It Now, who I know, they work in the UK too, as well as within family and friendship groups when worried about someone's behaviour. Well, if you were worried about someone's behaviour in a family or friendship group, that person would just be shut out immediately. No one's playing around with that. To get to a place where we show empathy for anybody who's sexually attracted to children, we are way off that, I believe. I tried to put it in my own head. If I had a friend who was openly sexually attracted to prepubescent children, I mean, naturally, how am I going to continue a friendship with that person? Now, some people will say that's counterproductive, Jeremy. Because if your whole friendship group pushed that man out of your friendship group, they're now alone and isolated and a lot more likely to commit the crime. Now, without thinking about it more deeply, I don't know where to go with that. But organisations like Stop It Now are phenomenal. There's the organisation here in the UK, and I want to learn more about them. They have a website called Scope, which is for teenagers who are worried about what they're watching online to come forward anonymously. I mean, surely we want that. So the final part of that question, the website's saying, it's also important to educate children about how to be safe online and who to report if they are concerned. Absolutely. That's most of the work that I'm doing in schools. In fact, that's all of the work that I'm doing in schools. And guess what? I recently got reported to the authorities. Somebody has anonymously reported to the education authorities about me going into schools and, in inverted commas, teaching children inappropriate things. I only found this out because one of the schools that I'd recently spoken at called me and said that there's been a claim against me, and they backed me because they had me in and saw how phenomenal everything that I was doing is. And you cannot believe how sad I was when I heard about that. Like, there's always like who's that come from? First of all, is it a parent? Is it a teacher? Is it a person who's following me that disagrees with what I'm doing? Even though, I'm so transparent with what I'm doing. All the recordings of my sessions to children are available on YouTube from start to finish. And one of the reasons why I do that is to let people see exactly what I'm doing so that they can give me feedback. And also I'm not pushing the boundaries. I'm not being too explicit. Everything's age appropriate. But my goodness, talk about, I haven't even got the words. So the best way to protect children is to be proactive as a society. Absolutely correct. So I really hope you found that interesting. Again, the survey, the website title is called "A Survey Found 1 in 6 Men Admit to Sexual Feelings for Children." So is pedophilia increasing? That's a great website article for us to go through. Again, the description is in the show notes. If you want to go and read the full report, which is like 50 pages long, it's quite in depth. That link will also be in the show notes. And please support this podcast. Please share it in your WhatsApp groups. Please hit the like buttons. Please leave a comment, even if it's an emoji, because the algorithm's going to completely shut this episode down. I'm really struggling with trying to get viewership, especially on my YouTube channel. I believe that I'm completely shadow banned. But that's the challenge. That's the obstacles. They're the barriers, and it won't stop me. I will continue pursuing what I believe to be correct, and that is communicating this topic in the most engaging ways that I can, trying to get it onto everybody's table and covering all sides of it. And I will try to stay as true as I can to my ethos, which is always centered around the primary concern being the protection and the safety of today's children. So thank you so much, and I hope you found this informative and engaging. Thank you.